Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going deep into chronic illness and pain management. And it's something that you've shared a lot of information about, and I think it's a topic that's probably personally relevant to you too.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a big topic. It's a complex landscape, but it's fascinating to me at least how much we can actually do to manage these conditions. It's not just, being passive. It's really about shaping your own experience.
So before we get too far, can we just start with the basics? What even is chronic illness and pain?
Yeah, that's a great place to start.
So we're all on the same page.
Yeah, I think the guide that you shared defines it really well.
Okay.
Talking about conditions that last for a while, like months or even years. And we're talking arthritis, diabetes, fibromyalgia, autoimmune diseases, all these things that are not just quick fixes, they're really journeys.
Right.
And a lot of times those journeys come with this constant companion, chronic pain.
And the guy makes this point that chronic pain isn't just physical. It's it really impacts mental and emotional well-being too. So it's
Yeah.
this whole other layer on top of it.
Absolutely. And that's something that often gets overlooked. We tend to focus on treating the physical symptoms, but the mental and emotional toll can be just as debilitating, I think.
For sure.
Yeah.
So let's talk about treatment then. The guide talks a lot about medical management.
Okay.
What are some of the key takeaways there?
Well, I think the first thing that jumps out is just this focus on personalized care. There's no one-size-fits-all approach.
Right.
And the guide really stresses working with healthcare providers to find a plan that works for you specifically.
That makes sense. But what does that actually look like in practice? What kind of treatments are we talking about here?
Well, medication is a big one for sure. The guide mentions NSAIDs for inflammation opioids for severe pain, even antidepressants, which I thought was really interesting.
Wait, antidepressants for pain?
Yeah.
I've never even heard of that.
Yeah, it's not that they block pain signals directly, but they can help with the underlying depression and anxiety that often comes with chronic pain.
Yeah.
Plus, some types of antidepressants have their own pain-relieving effects, so.
Interesting. So it's all about addressing the whole person, not just
Exactly.
zeroing in on one little symptom.
It's not just limited to traditional medicine either. The guide also mentions alternative therapies like acupuncture and chiropractic care.
That's a good point. And that kind of leads into the whole lifestyle side of things too.
Yeah.
It's what we do every day can be just as powerful as any medication.
It's almost like lifestyle as medicine, and the guide breaks it down into 3 key habits: diet and nutrition, regular exercise, and then sleep hygiene.
Right. The basics, but they're basics for a reason.
Exactly.
But let's dig into those a little bit more. What about anti-inflammatory foods?
Yeah, it highlights things like turmeric, leafy greens, fish, and of course, avoiding processed foods and sugary drinks.
Okay, that's pretty standard advice.
Yeah.
But why are these foods so important?
Well, it cites a study, I think it was from Namath University, that found turmeric to be really effective in reducing inflammation in people with rheumatoid arthritis.
Okay.
Apparently, there's this compound in turmeric called curcumin,
Ah.
and it's like this powerful anti-inflammatory agent.
So it's not just some old wives' tale.
Right.
There's actual science backing this up.
Yeah. And when it comes to exercise, the guide isn't talking about, running marathons or anything intense.
Right.
They suggest low-impact stuff like yoga, swimming, or even just regular walking, things that improve mobility and reduce stiffness without putting too much stress on the body.
Yeah, gentle movement.
Okay.
Yeah. That makes sense, especially for someone dealing with chronic pain. But does the guide say, how does exercise actually help?
It talks about how exercise releases endorphins, which are natural pain relievers.
Oh, right.
And it also mentions that regular movement can actually reduce inflammation in the body.
So it's kind of a double whammy. It's hitting it from 2 different angles.
Exactly. And then there's sleep, which I know is important for everybody, but even more so when you're dealing with a chronic condition.
Sure, for sure.
The guide stresses having a consistent sleep schedule and limiting screen time before bed, all that good stuff.
So we've covered medication, alternative therapies, lifestyle changes. It's a lot to take in, but I can already see how this is going deeper than just the surface level stuff you usually hear about chronic illness.
Yeah. And we're just getting started, but before we move on, is there anything from this section that particularly resonates with you based on your own experience?
I think what stands out to me is that connection between mental health and pain management. It's so easy to get caught up in treating the physical that we forget about the emotional side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the guide actually goes even deeper into that in the next section. Like, it explicitly connects chronic pain to anxiety and depression and how it's not all in your head.
Yeah, and it goes beyond just acknowledging the problem.
Hmm.
It offers like some actual tools for managing the mental and emotional side of things, which I think is so helpful.
It's like they've put together this whole toolkit.
Right.
Mindfulness and meditation are in their deep breathing exercises, and they even suggest exploring guided meditation apps,
Oh, I love this.
which is really accessible for people.
And speaking of accessible, you know what else caught my eye? They mentioned CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy,
Yeah.
but they actually gave some examples of how to apply it.
Right. There's this journaling technique they describe where you track not just your pain levels, but also your thoughts and emotions around the pain.
Okay.
The idea is to identify patterns and challenge those negative thought spirals.
That's so interesting. It's like reframing your relationship with the pain instead of just trying to ignore it.
Exactly.
And it's not just about solo strategies either, right? They talk about social support too.
Absolutely. Support groups and counseling, whether it's in person or online, can make a huge difference. Finding that sense of community, knowing you're not alone in this.
But let's be real for a second. It's one thing to read about these strategies,
Right.
but like actually putting them into practice in daily life,
Yeah.
that can feel like a whole other challenge.
You're absolutely right. And the guide doesn't shy away from the practicalities of living with chronic illness. It acknowledges that even simple tasks can become difficult.
Yeah.
And it offers some really helpful tips.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, remember those assistive devices we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
The guide actually goes into detail about how things like canes, ergonomic chairs, braces can make a big difference in terms of comfort and independence.
Okay.
And even mentions a study where people with osteoarthritis who used assistive devices reported significant improvements in their mobility and quality of life.
It's amazing how something so simple can have such a big impact.
Right.
But it's not always about physical aids, is it?
Right.
They talk about energy conservation techniques too.
Exactly. This part really resonated with me. They emphasize the importance of breaking down tasks into smaller steps, pacing yourself, avoiding overexertion. It's all about working smarter, not harder.
I'm thinking about that. Even in my own life, I always feel like I have to push myself to get everything done.
Yeah.
Maybe that go, go, go mentality isn't the best approach, especially if you're managing chronic pain.
It's a common trap, and that's where that social support comes in. Again, having people you can rely on, whether it's family, friends, online support groups, can make those tough days feel a little less overwhelming.
Okay, so we've covered medical management lifestyle changes, mental well-being, practical tips for daily living. It's a very holistic approach, and I can see why this guide resonated so much with you.
It's comprehensive, but it's also incredibly empowering. It doesn't just tell you what to do, it helps you understand the why behind it all, which I think is so crucial.
Absolutely. But as we're wrapping up this section, I'm curious from your perspective, what are some of the biggest hurdles people face when they're trying to manage chronic illness and pain? Like, what makes this journey so challenging?
That's a big question.
Yeah.
And I think the guide touches on it in some subtle ways, but one of the biggest ones is probably just acceptance. Like accepting that this is something that you're going to be living with for a long time. It's a part of your life now, and that can be really, really tough.
It's like grieving almost,
Yeah,
letting go of the life you thought you were going to have.
absolutely. And then there's just so much information out there, so many different treatments and therapies and lifestyle changes. It can be really overwhelming to know where to even begin.
Yeah. It's like information overload on top of everything else you're already dealing with.
Exactly. And then there's the stigma, especially with invisible illnesses. People might not understand what you're going through. They might minimize your pain or even accuse you of faking it.
The you don't look sick thing.
Yeah,
It's so invalidating, makes you question yourself and your own experiences.
totally. And that kind of feeds into another hurdle, which is that internal struggle. That voice in your head that says you're not doing enough, you should be handling this better. It's hard to be kind to yourself when you're constantly bombarded with messages about pushing through the pain.
It's like society expects you to just power through it, like it's a weakness you need to overcome.
Yeah, and that's where I think this guide really shines. It's not about pushing through, it's about finding what works for you.
Right.
It's about self-care and adapting your strategies as needed and finding your own rhythm.
It's about reclaiming your life even within the context of a chronic condition.
Exactly. And recognizing that reclaiming your life might look different for everybody. There's no one right way to live with chronic illness. It's about finding your own path,
Yeah.
your own definition of well-being. And the guide reminds us that even amidst all these challenges, there's room for growth and resilience and even joy.
Oh, I love that. And that's a perfect note to end on. I feel like this deep dive has been so packed with information,
Yeah.
but ultimately it's about empowering you, the listener, to navigate your own journey.
It's about asking yourself, how can I not just manage this condition, but thrive in spite of it?
And here's a thought to take with you as you continue on your journey. The sources we looked at today focused on individual strategies, but what about the role of community? How can we build stronger support systems for people with chronic illness?
That's a great question.
That's something to think about.
Yeah, and remember, you're not alone on this journey. There are resources out there, there's support, and there's always more to learn.
Until next time, keep diving deep.